Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have review of the Galaxy M15. Let's get started. This device is the most basic of the M series, which is usually a very attractive series by specifications and price, and this will be no exception. Honestly, that for the price it seems to me a good option, especially for the current price. At its launch, it had 3,999 pesos, that's more or less $225. And for the price context of Mexico, I consider that a sufficiently attractive price, although remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. However, as of the date of recording this video, its price has dropped to 2,499 pesos, that's more or less $140. And definitely for that price, it's a device that I could recommend to you directly, although obviously there are some points to consider that we'll be looking at throughout this video. But right off the bat, it's a Galaxy and it offers you very good benefits. I don't think its competitors have many aspects in which they can beat this device, so join me in getting to know it point by point so you can decide if it will be your next device or not. Let's start with the front design, where we will find possibly one of its few weak points, as it has very thick bezels, even still has a notch design. So this causes it to look like a device a little bit outdated. It doesn't look like a 2024 device, even from the low end. So in this aspect, definitely that we find something that I do not like so much. In fact, it also doesn't integrate any special Gorilla Glass or something like that. So we find neither a modern design nor good resistance, so definitely that in this front aspect leaves much to be desired. On the right side we find power button that at the same time is fingerprint reader and volume buttons, this in a plastic frame that looks like a matte finish well enough. At the top we find the microphone, while on the left side is the tray where we can place the SIM or microSD cards. At the bottom will be placed the headphone jack plus an additional microphone, the USB port and the speaker with a single perforation. Overall, the design of all these sides looks as it should. On the back, we are going to find a very reflective plastic cover. The fingerprints get marked in a considerable way, but in this case, it integrates a somewhat interesting finish. It is a small grid very similar to what we see on the Galaxy M35. In this case, it's going to project light differently depending on the angle at which it receives it. So it's not as simple or as minimalist a design as Samsung has accustomed us to recently, although the truth of the matter is that there's no module surrounding the cameras to give it a distinctive touch or anything similar. So they are still betting on a simple design, although this grid finish can give it a different aesthetic touch. We will find a weight of 217 grams, so it is not a lightweight device, although it has its benefit in the battery of what we will talk a little later. And finally, its thickness is 9.3 millimeters, which again does not translate into a thin device, but in a moment more I'll talk to you about the battery. The screen is 6.5 inches and we can definitely consider it to be a strong point, not because of its size but because of its technology, because we are in front of a Super AMOLED panel, which in this price range is unusual. This is going to mean that the screen is going to give us very intense colors, contrasts also very high because the black color will actually be totally muted pixels, so those areas will not emit light and therefore the contrast is multiplied compared to IPS screens. It also has good viewing angles, so it doesn't matter if you view the content directly from the front or from the side, so if you share a lot of content with a group of friends, everyone will be able to see the content well. In fact, it is also going to offer us a good resolution. In this case, we are talking specifically about full HD plus resolution, 2340 by 1080 pixels, reaching almost 400 pixels per inch. And this means that even text with small fonts will look sharp. It will be difficult to notice a pixel or notice low level of detail. In general, it is a screen that surprises a lot, especially for the current price, where competitors of that price will offer very simple screens, but in this case the screen is really very good. It also offers 90 Hz in its refresh rate, so it does have fluid movements and also has a good level of brightness that, complemented with Vision Booster, will give you a good experience under sunlight. This feature, called Vision Booster, Samsung introduced it a few generations ago, and what it does is to slightly change the colors when you are under sunlight in order to optimize the display a bit more. In fact, its peak brightness is 800 nits, so it's not that bright of a screen, but thanks to Vision Booster, it does optimize the content so you can see well what the screen is displaying under sunlight. On the other hand, with the minimum brightness, you are also going to find a comfortable experience since in addition to having a considerably low minimum brightness, it also includes the extra dimming function within the accessibility options so you can lower that brightness even more. If you set it to automatically enable this extra dimming at night, you're going to have a super comfortable experience whether it's daytime, outdoors, indoors, or at night. Although yes, it is not a screen that supports HDR content, but obviously this is a feature that we could only demand from more expensive devices. Overall, it is a screen of excellent quality that also through the settings will allow you to select whether you want more natural or more saturated color settings. And in fact, in the vivid setting, it also allows you to select a little bit more specific calibration of the white balance or also the RGB behavior of this display. So whichever way you look at it, it's a very good display. On the sound, we'll find something like what we would expect in this price range. Unlike the display where it surprised us for the good, in the sound it's simply what we expected from a budget device. That is, it does not integrate two speakers, so we only have mono sound and also highlight a lot the middle frequencies. It can become a bit annoying when you have the volume up. The volume is positive, but because it does not have so many bass or treble frequencies, it does not get to be very rounded and therefore yes, it can become annoying. But how about listening to a small test? Although remember that it is not the same to listen to it live. Fortunately, through the software, it integrates Dolby Atmos, so you could also have an immersive sound experience when you use headphones, and you also have access to a 9-band equalizer without the need for headphones. So if you lower the mid frequencies a little bit in this equalizer, you could get a higher quality sound, although obviously the volume is going to go down a little bit because you're lowering those frequencies. But fortunately, you do have this option which other manufacturers don't allow you to do. In fact, you also have adapt sound, so you can do a little test, and depending on how you listen, you can get to optimize the audio a little bit. So in general, the sound is not so good on the speaker, but it is improved a little bit by the software experience. In fact, speaking of software, it also integrates the standalone app sound feature, which allows you to send the sound of certain apps to Bluetooth devices, such as speakers, while keeping the sound of other apps playing on your cell phone. This allows you to play music on a speaker while you can watch TikTok videos on your phone at the same time. So it's a feature that is not present in many devices, that's why I like to highlight it. Also, as I anticipated, it does have a headphone jack, and that's a good feeling, but you can also connect wireless headphones to it. In this case, it will support aptX and LDAC as advanced audio codecs. So it does allow us a high-resolution audio, which is very positive being such an inexpensive device. This obviously with compatible headphones. And with respect to microphones, it integrates two, which is very good, especially in the current price range, because there are usually devices of the entry bed that begin to sacrifice microphones, offering you only one, which would be very bad. But here it does have stereo recording, so it gets to deliver in good quality. Let's try it out right now. Esta es una grabación de audio hecha con los micrófonos integrados del Galaxy M15 5G. As you can get to notice, the voices will be captured with good quality in well-controlled noise environments. And now let's take a look at a video recorded with this device in a noisy environment so you can see how the microphones behave there. And it is very clear that in these environments, the sound loses definition. You do not get to perceive an audio of such quality, although it does not generate this saturation noise. So it is not so bad, especially considering that we are talking about an entry-level device. The front camera of this device is 13 megapixels with f2 0-point aperture and fixed focus. It stands out because in the entry range we will usually find lower resolution cameras. Remember that like every Galaxy, it has the quick camera opening gesture by double pressing the power button, and this gesture is going to work even if you have the screen locked or also if you are inside any other application and want to quickly enter the camera. So I like the gesture. As you can appreciate, it's not so snappy taking high-speed pictures. Notice that there are moments where it tells you that it is processing the picture and that you should wait. However, if you slide this shutter down, you can access a burst so you gain more speed. In the upper right corner, there is a button where you can select some color filters that you want to use with its intensity modifier, and you can also access facial beauty effects where you will find 4 different parameters to configure. In addition, for a comfortable capture, it has palm gesture recognition, and in the settings you can enable a floating shutter button that you can place where you find more comfortable also for an easier capture. This front camera doesn't offer us such intense colors, but in the price range we couldn't get much more demanding. Overall, I think it gives us an acceptable result. The level of detail is above what I expected in this price range. As you can see, textures are very well appreciated. Overall, it is a device that has a good camera. Even though you have your arm stretched out and in conjunction with the fixed focus, it still has a good level of detail in these types of conditions. It's not an exaggeratedly wide camera though. In this case, for example, a group of 4 or so people at about the same distance barely managed to fit in the picture, and obviously those further away are going to come out much more out of focus. But for the price range, we can't get too picky. In fact, even if you're a little close to the camera, it does still have good focus and a good level of detail. Although obviously, if you want to capture something specific on your face very close, it will appear out of focus. Outdoors is where we have the best result, as indoors you notice that it loses quite a bit of definition and color saturation. But this is something we would expect from a device with such a simple camera. However, note that even at night, if you have a light source nearby, you can have an acceptable result. In darker areas, you will obviously notice a bit more noise and graininess with this automatic mode. But note that by using the night mode, you can have a cleaner picture that for the price range manages to stand up well. And by the way, in backlit scenarios, note that the preview obviously doesn't look optimized, but after taking the picture, it does manage to balance highlights and shadows well, although the highlight area is slightly overexposed. But this is getting too picky. Honestly, that for the price range, it does an excellent job. And as for the portrait mode of this front camera, note that it is not able to detect foreground objects, which is common in the range, so it's nothing really serious. Just when you take pictures of yourself, try not to be close to any object so that the result is much more natural. For the rear cameras, we will find the 17mm ultra-wide camera with 5 megapixels on its sensor, f-aperture 2.2 and fixed focus. It is a simple camera. Then the main camera of 26mm with 50 megapixels on its sensor has f-aperture 1.8 and autofocus, although it does not have optical stabilization. And finally, we find the macro camera of 2 megapixels with f-aperture 2.4, much simpler. Like any smartphone, it will have some delay in the preview and also has a small delay when trying to capture the exact moment, as you realize, but it is not really something very serious. In fact, for the price range, it holds up very well. And again, if you slide the shutter down, you can access a burst of up to 30 pictures, although it takes about half a second or so to react, and the space between one picture and another is not that small, but it can still be functional. Again, in the upper right corner, we find a button where we can access some filters with intensity modifier and also facial beauty effects with the same 4 parameters of the front camera. If you tap on the screen, you can adjust the focus and exposure, and within the list of more modes, you can find the professional mode where we will be able to modify more things. For example, the ISO, which can go up to 3200, the shutter speed, which can go up to 10 seconds, plus the compensation, the focus, and also the white balance. In fact, at the top, you can enable more options where you can modify contrast, highlights, shadows, saturation, and tint. So it has very good photography settings, although it doesn't allow RAW photography. And note that in this case, a QR code scanner is included directly from the main camera interface, although it is not able to detect the documents, so it does not have the scanner that we see in other Galaxy of higher ranges. This rear camera does have a high resolution mode that allows us to take advantage of the 50 megapixels of the sensor, and you really do notice a good level of detail in these photographs, obviously not at the level of much more expensive devices, but in the range there are other devices that also boast good resolution cameras and actually do not take advantage of it well. So in this case, the result is positive. Even in motion scenes, note that both the ultra-wide camera and the main camera have a good performance freezing well the movements. And in these outdoor scenes, we can more or less verify the quality of the cameras. Note that the ultra-wide camera is not so wide as it is 17 millimeters, unlike the vast majority of ultra-wide cameras on the market that are about 14 millimeters. But in this price range, it's not usual to see presence of ultra-wide camera. So in this case, highlights its incorporation and also still keeps the colors sufficiently intense, although it is evident the distortion generated at the edges of this camera. But as I say, it is appreciated that it is incorporated. The main camera will obviously have a much better performance in terms of level of detail and the quality of the lens, as we will not appreciate so many distortions, although a little chromatic aberration, but nothing really serious. For the price range, I think it fulfills a good camera. And by the way, if the width of the ultra-wide camera does not seem enough, or you consider that it has a low resolution, remember that you can use the panoramic mode, with which you gain much more amplitude still, and in fact you can use the panoramic mode in conjunction with the ultra-wide camera, so you gain not only greater horizontal amplitude as you usually gain with panoramic photographs, but you also have a lot of vertical space. Then you have a photograph with lots and lots of space. Now the zoom range of this device, actually notice that it doesn't really take advantage of the 50 megapixel sensor it has, because even though it allows us a 10x zoom, it's actually an ultra stretched image that has no detail at all. So I guess we could say that this device only gives us a maximum of maybe 4x zoom, where it still maintains an acceptable quality. Indoors, the ultra-wide camera is not able to give us such well-defined objects. The main camera does a better job in this regard, and I think it manages to disguise the presence of noise well, although also trying to remove noise can remove some of the details from the picture, but considering the price range, it performs very well. Even at night, if you have a good light source nearby, the ultra-wide camera still manages to do a decent job. Obviously, darker areas will appear with less definition and more noise. And the main camera also does a good job, although the colors don't come out as saturated as they should. But overall, as I say, the result, considering it's a budget device and night photography, is positive. You can use the night mode, although honestly it doesn't make that much of a difference. I was expecting something slightly better. And as for macro photography, the main camera will not allow you to get so close, but if you apply a little zoom, note that the photographs could come out with excellent detail, good colors, and what would stand out most would be the bokeh effect generated in a totally natural way. On the other hand, the macro camera that it incorporates does not generate such a nice blur and does not have such a level of detail, although fortunately the colors are maintained with sufficient saturation, unlike other macro cameras of devices that come super simple. So in this case, it is not a bad camera, but personally I would prefer to take pictures with the main camera applying zoom. Lastly, note that the portrait photos on this device come out considerably well considering the price tag. Believe me, they are about the same level as other much more expensive devices. That is, in the more specific areas of small gaps, they do not manage to detect depth well, but in general they do perform well, have a good level of detail and a positive blur effect. For video recording, we have simple stuff but enough. So you can record video in full HD at 30 frames per second, both with the front camera and with the main camera and the ultra-wide camera. So it's got good detail. Also notice that again, we'll have the special color filter button that does support full HD resolution. While you are recording video, notice that you have a button to take pictures, another button to pause and resume video, but here the important absence is that we do not find the button to rotate to the front camera, unlike other Galaxy devices. What we will find will be the button to turn on the flashlight without the need to cut the video recording, but note that you cannot switch to the ultra-wide camera without first having your recording. So it has a bit more limited operation compared to other Galaxy devices. Also, it obviously doesn't have a pro mode for manual settings. You can only move the focus and exposure compensation if you touch the screen. The ultra-wide camera will have a simple video recording just like what we saw in the picture. There is little definition, and in fact, even in bright scenarios, you are going to notice a bit of noise presence, confirming us that it is a pretty simple camera. The main camera has a better capture of colors, lighting, and detail, although it still remains as a basic quality. Obviously, in the price range within what we could expect, gives us an acceptable result. The good news is that the focus remains stable and the exposure also, two parameters that in this price range could lead to a bad experience, but this device records well. Indoors, you will obviously notice much more how the ultra-wide camera has a simple quality. There is a lot of noise and little definition in the level of detail. With the main camera, you can have a much more detailed video, although it still manages to distinguish a little noise, unlike photography where we would have a slightly cleaner result, but fortunately maintains good color saturation, so the main camera still manages to rescue this result. In backlit scenarios, notice how the device will give priority to illuminate the faces present, so it will sacrifice the burned background. So it is not recommended to record with the background illuminated, but it is recommended to record with the front lighting. When it stops detecting the face, watch how it will balance the lights and shadows better, so it is not recommended neither with the ultra-wide camera nor with the main camera, where we have exactly the same result. If you're in a shadow and the back area is very bright, it will give priority to illuminate your face, completely overexposing the back area. And in the evenings, definitely, that ultra-wide camera gets to fully reveal its weakness. It has very little level of detail and a tremendous presence of noise and grain that tries to be removed, but that also removes a lot of detail and therefore gives a mushy or watercolor-like effect that definitely results in a bad video. With the main camera, this does not happen as noticeable, so you have a better level of detail. That is why it is totally recommendable to record with the main camera, where we have a slightly nicer result without being something spectacular, but in the price range we cannot get so demanding in night recording. Note that with the ultra-wide camera we will have a simple level of stabilization when we are walking, due to the amplitude can disguise the movements a little, but when you're running it is definitely too noticeable, so it is not recommended. With the main camera it will be exactly the same. When you're walking it can still somewhat disguise the movements. But when you go running, it is not going to have a good result, even though within the price range we are probably talking about the best stabilization, which obviously falls short. The focus notes that it is going to be positive. In general, in this price range, the focus is usually very bad in all devices, but in this case it seems to respond well. It is not so fast, but honestly that I do not find something wrong with this focus. Even in more subtle movements, the focus is adapting with a good quality. And as for the zoom, note that if you record with the ultra-wide camera, obviously it will not allow you to apply any zoom, and if you record with the main camera, it will let you get up to 10x, but as in photography, the zoom looks super forced, you do not see a good level of detail, you even start to see a lot of noise. In general, it is not good at zoom. But curiously, it does offer a fast camera mode in 5x that can be useful for recording people, although it is not stabilized. So it looks a little strange movement and can reach up to 60x, so maybe you can get to record a landscape if the movement is fast enough, but it falls short compared to other devices that allow us to reach up to 1800x. And curiously, it also integrates a slow motion mode, something unusual in this basic price, although it is obviously simple at 120 frames per second, but its incorporation is appreciated. The front camera records with good detail, but not having stabilization, definitely that the result falls completely. I like that it has a good enough color capture, and as I say, the level of detail does come to stand out over many competitors that in this price range could record in a simpler way. However, it doesn't perform well in backlight, and obviously it won't have autofocus, which is expected, but the backlight will definitely force you to record in front light scenarios and not behind, because otherwise the result will be simple. In indoor scenarios, I was honestly surprised because it handles noise very well. It does not look in a strong way, plus it still manages to maintain a considerably good saturation in colors, especially taking into account the price that this device has. Therefore, at night, if you have a good light source, the result will honestly be good, especially in terms of color saturation. Obviously, if you have the light behind you, it's going to be a very complicated problem for this device, but even in those scenarios, it manages to collect enough lighting, and obviously in the much darker scenarios, it's not going to have the ability to get a good result, as it doesn't even allow you to turn on the screen as a flash simulation. And curiously, a fast camera mode is incorporated in the front camera, although it does not have slow motion, nor does it have a dual recording mode or anything, but we could not get so demanding. And in the software, we will also find positive things since it comes with Android 14. That is, it comes factory updated, and also you know that Samsung offers a good policy of updates. So this device has 4 years of guaranteed Android updates and 5 years of security patches. Definitely that in the entry segment, nobody is going to offer you this. This is an update policy that in other brands you find in more expensive devices. So this is definitely one of its strongest points. It also has a lot of added features. For example, you'll find edge panels where you have some quick app shortcuts or quick contact shortcuts, or you even have on-screen snipping tools and very advanced stuff, really. In fact, you can also download more edge panels through the Galaxy Store, so the experience really is very good. You also have a good level of customization. It has its own themes app where you can download more customization kits, modifying many things on your smartphone. Although in this case, I could highlight the absence of always on display, that having an AMOLED screen we expected to be present, but here you will not be able to have this type of covers when you have your device locked. What we will find will be the modes and routines section where you already know that you can customize and automate many things. Remember that modes are synced between all your Galaxy devices, so if you have a Galaxy Watch, you can sync with sleep mode and other things, so you can automate various settings on your phone, but even more specifically, you can create routines by simply defining causes and consequences, and obviously allows you to automate all sorts of things on your phone. Most of the most important settings of the whole cell phone configuration are available in this automation section. So if there is something that you do repeatedly through this phone, everything can be done automatically without you having to intervene. So the device is also going to show us on the lock screen. Just press the clock and watch how some additional tools will appear here that may be convenient because other manufacturers do not include it. And also within the labs section, you can force all apps to run in floating window mode. So there are no limitations. Obviously, there are some that won't be as well adapted, but it really works very well. You can open multiple apps at the same time, and if you combine it with split screen, you can have many apps running on your screen. You can resize and even change the transparency of these apps. So the performance really is about as advanced as you'll find in the industry, and to have it available on a device this inexpensive really is great news, because it's exactly the same performance that you would find on Samsung's high-end devices. However, the operating system comes a bit trimmed in other aspects. For example, you won't find as voice assistant, you're completely dependent on Google, and in this case it also has a gesture section to turn on the screen with 2 taps, or also put it on mute face down and some other similar gestures. And fortunately in this case, the one-handed use mode does shrink the screen both horizontally and vertically, so it's very much at your fingertips for any screen element. Within the gallery, you can also select multiple photos to create with different layouts. All this is obviously free of charge. Also, by selecting multiple photos, you can create an animated GIF, but it does not have more advanced features such as extracting images or extract text from photos, nor the eraser of objects and various functions that are reserved for devices of higher ranges. However, for having a Galaxy, it already includes Samsung members, where you can access a technical support forum where you can share any error or anything related to your cell phone. But more importantly, you also have access to a huge list of coupons in collaboration with restaurants, clothing stores, travel stores, and much more. So by having a Galaxy, you have these benefits that you could obviously get to take advantage of through this application. And finally, the operating system is generally well optimized to take advantage of vibration motors, although in this case, since it has a vibration motor on the Z-axis, it is much simpler, so you will not have as much feedback when interacting with different elements of the system. With respect to security, we find the side fingerprint reader, which has an obviously nice placement. However, it has a limitation that it only allows for 3 registrations. So personally, I don't like being so limited in this aspect. If you are a user who usually registers several fingerprints for convenience or several trusted people also for convenience, here you are much more limited. It comes complemented with facial recognition, but it is not in 3 dimensions, so we do not pay much attention to it because it is not so recommended in security matters. It also includes Google Extended Unlock, with which you can register your location or some trusted locations or even speakers, watches or headphones, Bluetooth, so that while connected to these devices, it also remains unlocked, giving a very comfortable experience. And in fact, it is curious that despite having a system cut in functions compared to other Galaxy devices of higher ranges, in this case it keeps Samsung Pass, which is Samsung's password manager, very comfortable to fill out forms automatically verifying through your fingerprint. And even you know that Samsung Pass allows you to save confidential notes inside the keyboard that you can access through your fingerprint, so filling out forms or things that you can usually reuse is very comfortable with this device. In the same way, it integrates the secure folder where you can store both files and applications, and all this protected with your fingerprint. And this secure folder, remember that you can also customize it by changing the icon and changing the name to make it more unnoticed. Then you have good privacy tools. It also includes dual messenger, so you can clone certain messaging applications, even with a different contact list, so you have very good tools. In fact, it also comes with Samsung Kids mode, so you can have a special mode for lending the phone to your children, and there you can select which applications will be available, and you can define other levels of restrictions. So the experience is completely kid-friendly as well, and it also allows you to encrypt your memory card and do a malware scan in collaboration with McAfee. So you're not just relying on Google Play Protect, which is usually a bit of a low level of security. In this case, Samsung offers you a higher level of security. Even if you happen to lose your phone, not only do you rely on Google's network to find your device, but you also have the Samsung Network add-on. So there is no doubt that in terms of security, it is also far superior to many of its competitors in the segment. The integrated battery has a capacity of 6,000 mAh. It is a very large capacity compared to most smartphones today that offer you 5,000 mAh. However, that does not always translate into longer battery life. You have to do the tests, and in this case, in my tests, it came out very well positioned. Since running the battery drainer that we always use in the foreground, it was close to reaching 6 hours. To give you a reference, most devices give us around 4 hours. So it is remarkable how much of an advantage this device can get. And running this drainer in the background, it did reach 6 hours. So it also has a good management of applications running in the background. Although I would have liked an even bigger difference, but overall the battery is really very good, complemented by a good traditional saving mode for everyday life. And also within these options, you can enable a more extreme mode in case of emergencies that will restrict many options, but the battery life will be much longer. So it can be useful as well. And with regard to charging, it supports 25-watt charging, which is a good thing, but the charger is not included in the box. And come on to Samsung, the charger you have to buy separately. The advantage is that you can buy power delivery chargers, not necessarily the original Samsung charger. So it has good charging compatibility. In this case, in my test, I used the original Samsung charger, and in 15 minutes it recovered 24% power. In 30 minutes it got up to 46%, and the full charge was finished in about an hour and a half. As you realize, it is not a very fast charge, but considering that we are talking about the entry range and that it is a very large 6 mAh battery, definitely that the result and the charging experience was very good. Obviously, we won't have wireless charging or advanced features, but through software, it does have good protection mechanisms to prevent rapid battery degradation. So you have the basic level, which is going to charge up to 100, and if it's still plugged in the current, it's going to discharge up to 95, and then it's going to charge again. This, as I say, to avoid battery degradation, or you also have an intelligent charging mode, so if you want to leave it charging all night, the device will learn your routine to charge slowly or finally. If you are one of those users who need to have all the time the power plugged into your cell phone, you can also block up to 80% charging in order to avoid degradation. This can be very useful if you usually drive a lot with your cell phone plugged in to protect the battery. So the autonomy is very good, the charging is good, the protection mechanisms are good, only the charger is purchased separately. In connectivity, we also have good surprises since this device does bring support for 5G networks, something that is surprising in the entry range. Usually entry-level devices sacrifice this aspect, so we will find good download speed. Also through the settings you can choose which applications can use your mobile data or which applications will only be able to connect via Wi-Fi. In this case, we did not find eSIM, but we could not demand it. It is a feature for much more expensive cell phones. And speaking of Wi-Fi networks, in this case, we did not find such a high experience. It supports Wi-Fi 5, but it is expected in the range. So you don't have such high Wi-Fi download speeds, but with mobile data you do. Also, the Bluetooth technology is 5.3. So you do have also a very good stability and good range compared to other devices in the range that have outdated versions. It also integrates NFC, so you can make mobile payments or connect to accessories with the back of the cell phone. And it also integrates FM radio, although it works exclusively when you have headphones connected. You can also do wireless projection of your screen with Smart View, so it's in an advanced way. You could project just one application while using other applications on your cell phone, or project with the screen off to save power. In short, it has a lot of advanced connectivity features that generally in this price range you won't find on other phones. Obviously, you won't be able to project your screen via cable, but it does support Android Auto, wireless, or wired. And another pleasant surprise is in the sensors, because it does integrate accelerometer, geomagnetic field sensor, gyroscope, which are sensors that sometimes some brands sacrifice in this price range. In fact, my only complaint will be that the proximity sensor is actually a contact sensor. So it is not enabled when you are close, but when it comes fully in contact with your ear, for example. So it can get a little bit of trouble with the proximity sensor. That would be my only complaint, really. Moving on, we come to the Galaxy ecosystem, another strong point. In this case, obviously not exclusive to this cell phone, but everything that has to do with the Galaxy world. You have a large number of devices that you can easily connect to this cell phone, and that not only connect, but also have a good interaction. Remember, you could answer calls from your tablet, or take pictures from your watch, or get notifications read from your Galaxy Buds, so you have a good level of interaction. The detail is that Samsung does not have a laptop in Mexico and in many other countries, but you could connect to a Windows laptop, although in this case the tool is not yet pre-installed, so it requires some additional steps, but it is possible. And through Quick Share, you can also send photos to cell phones or laptops as long as you install Quick Share. So the ecosystem is very complete, although not fully rounded as I would have liked. However, remember that Samsung is a brand that does not depend as much on Google as other brands. So you have SmartThings instead of Google Home to control your home devices, and it has very good compatibility. And in the cloud storage, it also has collaboration with OneDrive integrated in the gallery in case you want to back up your photos there. Let's go to the performance test. In this device, we will find the MediaTek Dimensity 6100 Plus processor, a processor that honestly is not present in many devices, which is good because usually in this price range we find very simple and old processors, but in this case it is not such an old processor. It is accompanied by 4 GB of RAM, which in the price range could become more or less usual, but for being a Galaxy, this gives me a bad feeling. Generally, on the Galaxy, we need a minimum of 6 GB for more optimal performance, especially when you have multiple apps open at the same time. And well, in this case, I only opened 10 apps and it gave me an average of 7.4 seconds per app. The first applications open much faster, but the more applications you open, the slower the device gets. This is because it only has 4 GB of RAM, which as I anticipated is not enough to maintain a smooth experience. Notice that the moment I try to go back to any of these apps that I have opened, they will actually restart, giving me a super bad experience in this aspect. So everything good that was going for this device starts to fall apart a bit if you are a user that requires a lot of apps open, as you will constantly see this kind of white screens. The ideal then is to try to keep 2 or 3 apps maximum open at the same time to maintain better performance, as even despite having another 4 GB of virtual RAM, you realize that it doesn't really seem to work well. So Samsung has 2 options: optimize the virtual RAM or increase the capacity of the physical RAM. Let's hope that for next generations they will fix it. In storage, we have the expected 128 GB. The good news is that you can put an additional 1 TB micro SD card, so there are no worries in storage. Next, let's test how the video editor performs stitching together 4 clips recorded with this device, totaling 1 minute in full HD. We only have this editor open, all other applications are closed, and that's it. It took only 21 seconds, showing us that it's a very powerful processor, which unfortunately is poorly complemented with a bad RAM capacity. So if you're going to focus on a single application, you can get very fast and very powerful performance, but if you want to have multiple applications open, you're going to suffer. For games, we will find the Gaming Hub, where you have games that you can run without the need to install them, thus saving storage. We are also going to be able to enter through here to Game Booster, where we can configure some other things like the shortcuts we want to have available when playing, the configuration of our screenshots when playing, highlighting that you can record your screen up to full HD, something that even very expensive devices do not allow. You can also select if you want to have a battery saving profile or a performance profile, and if you use a power delivery charger, you could also play without passing power through the battery to avoid overheating, something that few devices allow. And inside the apps, you have an alternative management that could give you more performance, although it could heat up the cell phone more. And once you are inside a game, you have some tools that appear minimized, so it is a little difficult to show them, but in this case, it would allow you to turn off the screen momentarily without suspending the game to carry out some content download. It also allows you to lock the navigation buttons, take screenshots in image or video, and finally it has here a button to open applications in floating window. Although you know that having a very limited RAM, also this experience will be very low when you are running a game. In this case, it also allows the installation of additional plugins, although honestly I would not recommend you to activate or use any of these because it will consume more RAM, which is the most precious asset in this phone. In Call of Duty, this device gives us by default the average graphic quality at an average frame rate, but it also allows us to go up to a high frame rate. In this case, there aren't as many effects available, so it's not a gaming-focused device, but with this setting, look at the performance it gave us. We had 39 frames per second on average. It really maintains a very good stability. There doesn't seem to be too many fluctuations, and the temperature also remains stable enough. Recording the screen for quite a long time, the device maintained good performance. So honestly, it gives us a nice performance. Obviously, as I tell you, it's not recommended that you have multiple apps open. So in this case, we only had the game and the monitoring app running at the same time. And in this scenario, the device did come to give us a remarkably good performance. In the Legends game, we changed the automatic setting to a setting suitable for the price of this device, i.e. low detail at 60 frames per second. And in this setting again, we had a good experience, although the game, you know, has strange behavior. So at the beginning, it tried to go up to 90 frames per second, and it actually did. But after a few moments, it stabilized at 60 frames per second. And in this setting, it had much better stability. It was very smooth. So again, the experience was really very good. Again, the temperature didn't even get above 39 degrees Celsius, so it's a good device for gaming, even though that's not its primary focus. In the SpongeBob game, by default, this device has the medium resolution and quality. However, for a test commensurate with the price of this device, we set resolution and quality low at 60 frames per second, although we kept the smoothing enabled. And in this case, the truth is that the experience was exaggeratedly good. Maybe the processor has even higher capabilities, but for the price we set this graphic quality. So, as you notice, even in the graphics you see excellent stability, no serious fluctuations, and it did not exceed 40 degrees Celsius. Again, being remarkable the management it has of the temperature. Also, if you combine it with the excellent battery it has, I think it can be a good tool for gaming. And lastly, in Genshin Impact, it defaulted us to very low graphics quality. We left it at that setting but went up to 60 frames per second to see what it was capable of. And in this case, we did notice a lot more jitter than we had noticed in past games, but it's still good performance. The lowest it got was 21 frames per second, so in this price range it's remarkable that you can run Genshin Impact because there are other devices where we haven't even been able to test this game in this entry range. So the truth is that the performance was very good, the temperature again was kept under control, although obviously it wasn't such a complicated task because the graphics settings we kept them down according to the price. So in conclusion, it is a device that will offer us a good balance of good specifications and good features at a price that is not so high. Honestly, I would recommend it, but you must be very aware that you will only be able to run 2 or 3 applications at the same time. Otherwise, the experience is going to be very disastrous, even though in all other things it is very good. But the RAM memory can work against you if you are one of the most demanding users in terms of the number of applications open at the same time. Otherwise, it is an excellent device. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you know you can tell me about it, and I'll see you next time.